So the summary of what has been happening till now is just we anchored the background of the tutorial, and then it started with Balaji's presentation on various infrastructural options for connectivity. Now from here what we thought is that we would get into the other issues when we talk about computer networks, so that it's not only the physical layer. When we talk about computer networks, the whatever has been discussed till now by Balaji falls into the physical connectivity options that you have, whether it is wired or wireless means. Let me try to see how I can quickly get into the other layers of network, so that we are complete in the entire protocol stack. So the agenda for this session I have is, when we talk about networking, obviously we need to first understand some basics about the protocols and how do they get designed and how do they get implemented. Second thing is, since our interest is to look at the ICT implementations at a wider scale, understanding of some backbone architectures at international backbones would give certain insights, as well as the national backbone. Then we thought that we can discuss to you about some of the hardware devices that the network computing devices that are there. We can take you around and then explain you the functionalities of these devices, and we will touch upon some widely used applications. And finally, to touch upon the network diagnostics, like for example, if you have to debug a problem in networking, what are the common tools and commands that are used, or then it will be taken over by Pramod to explain the network security and the management solutions to operate. So this is how this talk is going to be originated. So before getting into this formal presentation, what I thought is, whatever Balaji has been talking is something like laying of the roads. So like for example, you have these kind of roads and things like that. Typically when we come into the highway and then you get into a normal ring road, and then you get into the lane, and then you might get into small gullies and things like that. So essentially what happens is, what Balaji was trying to talk is from the physical infrastructure. How do we lay these roads to move from one place to another? So essentially you have mechanisms to lay the roads by putting the wires, or else through air, through wireless you can go. So that is the physical infrastructure when you talk about computer networks. So essentially when you look at the analogy of the roads, and then what we are talking in computer networks is that you have the houses or the shops as your computing nodes, as your PCs or desktops and things like that, or it can be servers, or it can be huge servers like Google or Yahoo or something like that, who are attached to a highway, where people can easily go, and many people come there for access and things like that. The reason for me to put this diagram is to see that these roads are different in their magnitude and in their order. Like the highways are going to be quite wider, it can take many vehicles, it is more regulated. But these lanes and small roads, which you typically look at the dial-up access or whatever you said as the last mile connectivity, when you see they are generally just you can't, it's not fully regulated, it's just open, and it is generally a broadcast, or it's a shared medium basically. So whatever we face in the road, the problem, you always have the problem in the networking, like congestion, traffic regulation, and many people going in and trying to access a same shop or a same resource. So what till now Balaji was trying to say is one aspect of it. So when you talk about computer networks, first thing is the infrastructure. So you need to connect them, that is one. But that alone is not sufficient. You need to find mechanisms. How do you reach here? How does the person who is living in this home know where is this particular shop is? So how does he find it out? So these kind of things are solved by various other layers which try to help you out to find it. So that essentially gives the reason why in network we always talk about layers. So you have a physical layer, and then you have the data link layer, and then you have the network layer, and then you have the transport, and then you have the application. This is typically in the TCP/IP stack, but you can have presentation as well as session layer over on top of it in a OSI model. So now when we try to understand this, So I'm just again highlighting whatever Balaji is covered is.
7-layer stack.
Yeah.
Useful only for theoretical discussion.
Wha-
Usually, practically, we have only got TCP/IP for.
You are right. You are right. That's why I'm just stopping it here. Data link layer, network layer, transport and application. I'm not putting much into the OSI part. The prevalent, what he's trying to say is the prevalent protocol is the TCP/IP. It is not the OSI. Even though it was some time back, 20 years back, there was a discussion which would be the best protocol. Now it goes without saying that the TCP/IP is omnipresent now. So whatever Balaji is covered fits into this kind of layer, and of course he touched some aspect of data link layer also. So now let me just get into this. So this is just to give a brief overview of how these things are there. As we rightly said, the presentation and session layers are not being addressed in the TCP/IP stack. So what you see in a TCP/IP is this. So whatever protocols Balaji was talking, the 802.3, okay, he didn't talk about 802.3, he was talking about 11 and then 16. Essentially they have certain physical characteristics and standards, and they have the interface details and the standards that talk at the link layer also. So some aspect of these two has been covered. So there are two other things there which are quite crucial. The network layer, which would essentially take you out and get connected to some other place, and then the transport layer, which makes the transport of your packet from your system to the server or back to your system, and applications sit on top of it which utilize this these protocols. Now when you look at these, now let me get into these two things because this has been fairly touched upon. So when you look at these two things, usually the fundamental aspect that comes into networking is the connection. Is it connection oriented or a connectionless kind of a protocol? So whether you are going to have direct connections, or are you going to have virtual connections, or you don't need to even have a virtual connection. So connection is always necessarily doesn't mean that you need to have a physical cable. There can be logical connections also. So typically what you look at it in the network layer is you have these options. You can go for a network layer which is connection oriented or connectionless. So there are other protocols like ATM and frame relay which are connection oriented, but IP is a connectionless protocol. What it means is that it doesn't really expect any connection to be established, virtually also to be established. It is basically working on the principle of store and forward. So all the packet that are going to be sent from a user A to somewhere a user B can get buffered at say D, E, F like that. So first it comes here, it gets processed, it's pushed down here, it gets processed, and finally goes there. And it is also known that the IP, the connectionless protocol, is a best effort delivery, in the sense it's not going to guarantee you anything. It doesn't mandatorily guarantee you anything. It says that if I will try my best to deliver the packet. Coming to the transport layer, again you have two options, whether you can have a connection oriented protocol or a connectionless protocol. So TCP is one such thing which is connection oriented in nature, so that which means before any application that is using this particular protocol called TCP, it would first establish a connection, and then only it would use that particular connection for communication. There is another option which you have, UDP, which is not connection oriented. Now you see the various applications on top of it, like Telnet, FTP or HTTP. You might be using SMTP, email and other services on top of these applications. So here you see a range of changes of, you have these opportunities to choose at each and every layer. So this is essentially layer 2 and below, layer 2 and layer 1, layer 3, layer 4 and application layer. So it can be 802.3, which means it's Ethernet or CSMA, or it can be frame relay or PPP. So when you talk about data link layer, Balaji was also talking about 802.11 and then 802.16. Essentially 802.11, as he rightly said, it is getting replaced, it's replacing the 802.3, which is a wired infrastructure of a shared Ethernet protocol using this 802.11 wireless LAN basically. Unlike that, this is for local area network. This is what I am trying to make a point. So in a local area network, currently it is 802.3. When you have a wireless UTP cables getting connected, that is getting replaced with WLAN. in a wide area network situation, they are attempting to go to larger distances with 802.16, where currently you can, through wired, you have to use these protocols like PPP or SDLC or frame relay and things like that. So essentially, when you look at a stack, it gets, if it is Telnet, TCP, IP and 802.3, it is a local area network stack, and for a wide area network stack, it can be like that. So the protocols that are used for wide area network and this protocol that are used for local area network are not essentially the same because of various physical properties of distance and other characteristics of the link layer issues. Now typically this is how a wide area network would look like. You can envisage what you see is, this is a cloud. So you have your kiosk or a telecenter here. So what you have is, you have a server that is running HTTP and hosting your website or email, something like that, like what somebody else might do and things like that. Some people in the home can get connected through their PCs to the cloud through dial-up or some other mechanism. Something happens there in between. That is what is defined by the network layer and the transport layer. So basically the network layer, the routing of the protocols, routing protocols, how to move this particular, if this particular PC wants to get connected to the server, how does it know? There are intermediary routers or network equipments in between, and they should be knowledgeable enough to move these packets to this particular server. So again, another view of it is that this is from a wide area network, from a local area network perspective. So what you have is, this is your kiosk. In your kiosk you have a 802.3 setup where you have a hub or a switch and you connect say 10 or 15 machines. Similarly, there is someone there like that, someone there like that. Now if these local area network, they would like to get connected to the internet, then obviously they need to get a layer 3 device. It can be a router or it can be a layer 3 switch, and then through that this cloud comes. This cloud is the same what we saw last time and this one. So this is the cloud which gets minimized here. So essentially when you zoom in over here into a local area network, what you see is the setup what you have, whether it is wired or wireless. Now media, I am going to not touch on it because Balaji has touched a large part of it. Now the other aspect that when we talk about networking, you would be quite frequently coming across the IP addresses and port and other addresses basically. So when Balaji was saying that when you use a lease line connectivity, you are provided with a public IP. So IP addresses are nothing but the logical addresses which are quite agreed upon across the world. So there is a consortia called ICANN. So if you visit icann.org, you would know more detail. They are like the central agencies for providing and allocating the IP addresses. This is similar to that of the spectrum allocation what Balaji was saying in the radio frequencies. So there is an agency which controls it. Similarly, it is here which provides the public IPs over there. So in the past, no one envisaged that IP would explode in such a way. So they never expected such a business potential of this communication mechanism. So the IP addresses which currently being used widely is of version 4, IPv4, which has 32 bits to represent, so that maximum of only 2 power 32 machines or hosts can be connected. So then some 10 years back they found a problem that we will soon run out of the IP addresses, so something has to be done because the connectivity is getting caught up. So then they came up with the requirement of some reserved IPs, or what is called as the private IP addresses. So they now what they say is that we will use some of the IP addresses, we will reserve it so that these IP addresses will not get routed, or they won't be moved in the internet. They will not be understood by, or they would not be taken care by the routers for forwarding. These are used essentially for the intranet or the organizations for them to get connected. So that, for example, earlier the requirement would have been like, if I have 300 machines and if all the 300 machines have to get connected to the internet, all of the 300 machines should have a public IP. Now by this introduction of this private IP, that problem is solved, so that I don't right now need 300 public IPs. What I need is few public IPs, like I can just manage with 4 or 5, 4 or 8 or whatever it is, 16 usually or whatever it is, and then what I can do is for all the local machines I can just allocate the private IPs which will directly anyway not be routed over there. So by this you solve the problem to some extent, but still it is not fully, it's not a full solution, but to an extent. So that's where you get into the version 6 of the IP, where the number of bits to use or the size of the IP address is increased to 128 bits, so that it goes in orders of magnitude to attach many mobile devices or anything like that. Now essentially the IP addresses are varied by classes like class A, class B and class C. Essentially an IP address will have two parts in it. One is, when I say an IP address, you can say that from what network it is from, and when I also I can say whether it is a host or is it just the network address of it. So there are essentially two parts in any IP address. It has a network part and the host part of it. And maximum number of the classes of addresses are like class A, class B and class C widely. D and E are usually not used because they are used for specific purposes like multicast and for other research purposes. A uses if you have A, that means you can have multiple networks. You can have again between multiple networks you can have multiple hosts. But when you go for B, it is slightly lessened, and then when you come to C, it is again, number of hosts is just maximum of 255 hosts, that's all. So that defines the addressing of here. So what you can understand in a nutshell is that for getting an IP address, it's not that you can just assign. Right now you can assign, you need not have to get the permission of ICANN, which I said, the agency, for allocating the private IP addresses. So typically like 10.0.0 something or 172.16 or something might, you can just, if you have a local area network, if you don't want to get connected to internet, you can directly use the private address. Otherwise, if you want to get connected to public IP and if you want to host services, obviously you need to get the permission and get the public IP allocation. And it's interesting to note, the public IP allocation is also kind of, it's allotted based on that. When I say an IP, you can say from which country that particular packet has come from. So it has ranges. For Asia Pacific, it is this. It would be of, if it is class C, class A, class B, these ranges are being blocked like that. So it's quite organized. And then coming to the ports are nothing but the applications. When you talk about individual applications like HTTP or SMTP and things like that, these applications would need certain virtual addresses to be represented or to be uniquely identified. So that is what is called as the port address. These are all virtual. Now comes the physical address of the networking entity, which is the MAC address. So it is nothing but when you look at any machine, you have the network interface card. So a LAN card or whatever you call. So each of these NIC cards would have a hardware address or the network address which gets embedded and which cannot be changed, unlike the IP address. IP address, I can change the IP address of a machine anytime if I have sufficient privileges. Unlike that, changing of MAC address is not that easy. Usually it is not possible. So this is some overview of the addressing. So what happens is, when you go back to this diagram, what happens is the machines over here have a lot of interface cards, and those machines have the MAC addresses. So these MAC, and you have the routers, the machines also have the IP address. So when a packet is sent from one client here to one server here, it comes to the router, and the router takes a decision only looking at the IP address. Where should I forward it to? Should I put it on to this link, or should I put it on to this link, or there can be a number of links also. So that,
who will provide the MAC address?
it is usually provided by the manufacturer of the NIC card. The card, when you get your PC assembled, you get the NIC card also. The manufacturer of the card assigns the.
Suppose I have the two systems, so both same card.
It's quite unlikely. The reason is that it uses 48 bits for representing that address, and there also the allocation, there are the vendors who get registered. If I want to manufacture an NIC card, I'll have to get the permission and get my own allocation. I have a OEM number, and then I have.
24 bits are for the manufacturer.
You are right, OEM for unique identification. So it will rotate after certain years. It's quite unlikely. It's quite unlikely for you. Right, you are right. So it's quite unlikely for you to enter into it.
So every card having a number.
Yes. So that would be there in the individual devices over here, and also all the interfaces. When you mean any interfaces in the router, that router, for example, if you want to connect a 802.3 interface LAN to this routing device, that will also have an interface of 802.3. That would also be having a MAC ID for it. Because these, the reason for these addresses are quite important. See, for example, in the local area network, these MAC addresses are very much important, without which the packets, there are a lot of things that you can do. Why you need an address is like, why we need a name is to kind of know each other. Similarly, for example, if there is two, let us forget the wide area network situation, let us come only to LAN. So when two people are sitting in the lab, I am sitting in ground floor and someone is sitting in first floor, and if they want to communicate, then actually you have two devices that you can use in the local area network. Either you can go for a hub or you can go for a switch. Okay. For example, if you go for a hub, the problem with the hub is that it's a typical broadcast media. So what it does is, it doesn't look at anything. It just takes whatever input whoever communicates to that hub. So it will be like this. So hub is there, multiple ports will be there. So A is here, B is here. So irrespective of C and D trying to communicate anywhere else, all the frames, or what we call it as packets, come over here and it gets sent to all the other ports. So essentially internally what happens is, everyone, even B, if A only wants to communicate to B, the message sent, and assume that C wants to communicate to D, the information what A wants to send to B and what C sends to D also comes to this particular port. Okay, but it's only that particular machine doesn't pick it up, because it looks at, for it has to know from whom I should communicate and what should I take. So these addresses are more important for the NIC cards to pick it up. It will look at, whenever it senses the cable and input comes to it, it looks at what is the destination MAC address. So there will be typically the from and to addresses there. The from MAC, that is from the machine A, because E is communicating to from this from, and the to address would be the MAC address of B if A wants to communicate to B. So this information is actually sent to C also, D also. What happens is, C and D will not pick up this packet frame. Reason is because this MAC is not theirs. Okay, so this MAC address is very much essential there. Now in case if you, nowadays hubs are almost obsolete, people use switches. So the advantage of using a switch is that it drastically controls the broadcast domain. What I mean by that is, you have no essential, see, as Balaji was saying, the 802.3, 16, all it's like a shared media. Like the point what he raised is that when number of users keep growing, the bandwidth is going to be shared, so you will get only less amount of bandwidth. So these issues are there because of the way in which these protocols work. So what happens is, in the hub, it will be always highly populated with unnecessary packets to unnecessary ports. But in a switch, what happens is, it maintains something called as a switch table. So it knows it maps an ID of a particular port and then the particular MAC address which is there, and it will not unnecessarily broadcast it. So it will curtail the broadcast domain, so that the bandwidth what you get, the same 100 Mbps thing, if you use a hub, is going to be totally different when you use a switch. It will be more efficient. Okay, so this is the typical use of the MAC addresses at local area network. There, apart from that, there are other uses also when you move between different places. This is one particular scenario. Now similarly in the IP case also, why do you need an IP address? It's not hard coded into any of the hardware device like this. It's just assigned by a network or a system administrator when he loads a particular operating system. So the reason is, when the packet goes out, your service provider's router is sitting here and he needs to know where should this packet go. So that particular information is not static, it's dynamic, because you might visit today google.com and again yahoo.com or multiple things, and each of those web servers will have different IP addresses. So from IP would be probably your machine, but the to IP would be keeping on changing. So based on the to IP, to which IP it has to go, it looks at the routing table, typically to the switching table here in the LAN. The router maintains something called as the routing table. The routing table is quite dynamic in nature. Okay, so there is, okay, now let me get into two things. One thing is the data part of it, another one is the control part of it. In the internet, what happens is, data moves from here and there and people communicate. That's one view of looking at how the packets move. The other way of looking at internet is the control part of it. Who maintains the routing table here, here, here and all? Because assume that this router is going down for some reason. He should know. If he doesn't know, then he will, this guy cannot reach over there, and he should find an alternate path to reach that LAN. There would be alternate ways to do it. That is the advantage of IP, because it is connection-less protocol. For example, if it had been a connection-oriented protocol like ATM or say frame relay or X.25 protocol, what it would do is, in a connection-oriented network layer, it would first, before A connects to B, it will set up the virtual path, and all the packet after that blindly will just, it's like then works like the router will after that work like a switch only. It just looks at the IP and puts onto the respective port, it goes there in a connection oriented network layer. But unlike that, in a IP scenario, this periodicity of changing of routing table is very important. So that's the reason you look into that. Of the routing is a concept there where the routing algorithms are there. So this is the control plane aspect of it. So it periodically for every few milliseconds or few seconds it's configurable, and so it keeps on giving broadcasting information. I am up, I am down, I have come up, this is my neighbor, that is my neighbor, and all that stuff. It's like typically in a road case you go there and you want to go to this shop here and you don't know where to go, you should take this road or this road. So then there are signboards there which says that you go there 3 kilometers and then take a right, you will probably end up there. So this is typically the routing information what it gets built in the routers over there. Only thing is in this case it is static because this shop is not going to change, and this board is the periodicity of changing this board is quite very rare. But in this case it's haphazard because any router can go down, any link can go down for any various, like the road cut is very uncommon. Suddenly the road is not available for you. Such a kind of a scenario in real life is very, very rare, whereas in networking it's quite possible. So you need to have the dynamism built into the control plane. So that is being addressed by the routing protocols. So now for the routing protocols to work, the heart of the issue is the addressing, IP addressing. So what you need to have is somebody should know where should I go. So which network I should forward it and how nearer it is. So then comes the next question. It doesn't blindly forward it. These routing algorithms should be intelligent enough to know which, if I have 2 or 3 alternate routes, which would take me faster, or is it how many hops? If it is 10 hops and if it is 2 hops, sometimes 2 hop might take more time because it might be too much congested. 10 hop length might be quite efficient for me. So these kind of decisions are encapsulated in these protocols to handle it as metrics, routing metrics, and based on that this routing table is frequently getting updated. Actually it depends on the protocol. For example, the routing information protocol, RIP protocol follows hops, okay, but if you look at OSPF and other things, the metric over there predominantly is millisecond, like the RTT. Basically if I do a walk from there to come back here, the round trip time for me, it gives based on that it takes addition. So basically there are 2 important algorithms. One is called as a distance vector routing algorithm, the other one is the link state routing protocol. But this is just algorithm. The implementations are different, like routing information protocol is there, which is called RIP and version 1, version 2 and all. You have OSPF and then you have BGP and things like that. And it is not blindly you can use any of these things. You need to essentially know only when you want to communicate within an autonomous system or within your own unit. For example, if you take the country's education research network, ERNet, it's only one autonomous unit even though it's spread across the country. So it's enough if you go in for a OSPF kind of a protocol. But if you would like to interconnect with an external autonomous agent, another setup like that, and if you want these networks to intercommunicate, then you need to have a border gateway routing protocol. So these routing protocols are implementations which are derived from these algorithms and mix and match also. And these implementations are specific, like RIP, as he said, it uses hop. RIP doesn't use milliseconds or RTT, but OSPF uses milliseconds and things like that. But in theory, if you look at it, there are multiple parameters like you can take for metric and things like that, but still routing as a area still is an R&D, whether it's in the wireless domain or it is working still fine, but still there are a lot of work to be being researched upon. But basically it works, mostly the RIP works on the number of hops. Now let me just get into, after just sufficiently understanding this requirement of IP and then the MAC and then the routing requirement, we'll just get into the backbone architectures. This is to just give you a glimpse of, I think we did this one, the connection and connectionless, about the different kind of backbone. What do we mean by network backbone and how does it look like? This is one backbone, like I am just skipping the ERNet because you can take a look at in the ERNet.in site. This is a JANET, which is the Joint Academic Network, which is a private and the government funded network for Europe, UK. And typically you can look at the history of it. Now you would understand how India is kind of lagging. See, in 1984 to 1990 itself, they were having about 8 Mbps, okay? 1993, 34. 1995, 155. 1998, 155. 2001, 2.5. 2005, to be determined. It's a whole slide, but I know right now they have 60 Gbps connectivity. Okay, so this